morning, YouTube. Today we are going to be doing the 2,000 mile review on the 2017 Harley-Davidson Dyna Street Bob. Now, to be exact, this is going to be the 2,258 mile review. As you can tell, there have been some changes to the bike, but I did actually take this bike off of the showroom floor, so I'm going to be doing all of my reviewing from stock. So if you're looking at stock, that's fine. If you're looking at aftermarket, I'm going to be touching on kind of the aftermarket parts and why I did such things. That way you kind of have a better idea of, if you're looking to buy one of these bikes, you can kind of make your own decision on whether it's going to be the right fit for you or not. So a little bit about myself. If you are new to the channel, I am 25 years of age, but I have been riding pretty much my entire life. I grew up racing motocross. I've been on the street since I was 18. So definitely not the most experienced rider, because I know there's going to be some old heads out there that are going to say that I don't know a goddamn thing about what I'm talking about. But I'm also not someone who just got their motorcycle endorsement yesterday. So the way that I like to do my bike reviews is go through a quick pros and cons list, pretty much starting off with the cons that highlights things I didn't like about the bike, and then also mention some upgrades that I would consider personally as a must-have. Now, please keep in mind that everybody is different, everybody is shaped differently, everybody has different preferences. So I'm going to just give you the data, and then you do with that data as you please. So jumping straight into the cons, the first thing that I absolutely hated about this bike was the seat and the handlebars. Now, the seat is kind of notorious for Harley-Davidson. Any open-minded Harley-Davidson rider would admit that 90% of the seats that go on stock Harley-Davidsons are garbage. And the ones that come on the Street Bobs are no different. They went with a very low profile, very retro look to it. But at the end of the day, if you're doing anything aside from just normal around the town, maybe bar hopping, that seat's not going to do it. Now, of course, the smaller you are, the better it's going to work out for you, because you don't have as much weight pushing it down on your ass. But for a big dude like me, I forgot to mention I am 6'2", 270 pounds, so I'm definitely not on the smaller side. It just didn't work for me. One of the main reasons was that it has a very flat profile, and with it coming with a 103 motor, I mean, it definitely has some power. So when you're getting on the throttle, your ass tends to slide off the back of the seat. Now, I have heard this complaint from a lot of people, but like I said, if you're not doing any long rides or any aggressive riding, you might be able to do away with that stock seat. Or not do away, but deal with that stock seat. And circling back to the handlebars, they come with, I cannot remember if it's 12 or 14 inches. I want to say that they are 14 inches total. I'm not sure. I'll go ahead and put it up on the screen here. But they're mini ape hangers. Once again, tying into that retro, kind of old school look. As far as looks go, I mean, if that's the style you're wanting to go for, they're not terrible. The problem that I had with them was just how they felt. Now, the height on them is good. I was totally okay with the height. The pullback was even okay. It was really the angle of the grips. I'll include some footage here of what the bars used to look like, and I don't know how well this footage shows it, but it does angle your wrist in. So, for example, my T-bars are fairly straight. There's not much angle to them, but on the ape hangers, they almost had an angle like that on them. Now, they're not as pronounced as I'm doing it, of course, but it definitely does twist your wrist a little to the outside, I guess you could say. And once again, going on longer rides and stuff like that, it just got uncomfortable for me. But once again, the size and shape of you is going to greatly affect that, depending on how far you're reaching up, how far you're reaching forward. So, once again, take that info with a grain of salt. Moving on to the next con on my list, and this is going to be a duh factor, but it's still a con nonetheless, is the amount of wind that you catch on this bike. Some previous bikes that I've owned and ridden, for example, I still own a 2014 Sportster. With the Sportster, you sit a little bit more in the bike, as opposed to the Street Bob, you're more up on top of the bike. And that just pretty much opens you up to all of the highway air. Now, of course, with my setup now, not so much an issue, but I'll go ahead and kick back to some footage of before I did all these upgrades. You can see that I'm pretty much just open to the elements at this point. Like I said, it's going to be a duh moment, but it's definitely, I would say it's not something that people consider right off the bat, just because until you get it up to highway speeds, you really don't realize how in the open your body is. And then another thing I'm going to throw on the cons, just because I can and because I feel like everyone does, is going to be the exhaust. Now, this is not super focused on Harley. This is more towards environmental regulations, yada, yada, yada. But the exhaust is far too quiet for my personal taste. But the good news is with a popular model such as the Street Bob, you can usually find a good pair of slip-ons for pretty cheap. Probably under $50, definitely under $100. So I know that list is fairly short, but that is going to wrap up my cons list. Now, I could dive way deeper into some things that I'm just not quite happy with, but that's going to be way too personalized for me. So for example, I like to do aggressive hill country, throw it into the curves type riding. So a lot of the things that I'm going to say need fixing or need upgrading are going to be more focused on the type of riding that I do, as opposed to the type of riding that the normal rider would be doing. But just a hint on those, they would be stuff like the rear suspension. The rear suspension wasn't terrible, but it definitely could use an upgrade. And then of course the front suspension as well, the stock tires, just it's very nitpicky, so I'm not going to bore you with that. So jumping into the pros list. So the first thing that I noticed right off the bat with this bike was the weight. So I can't remember the specific weight. I'll go ahead and throw it up on the screen here. But it's quite a bit heavier. I want to say it was between 75 and 100 pounds heavier than my Sportster, but it definitely does not feel like it. The way that the weight is positioned on this bike is absolutely incredible. It's definitely one of the favorite things about this bike, is just it's so nimble, and that's even at stock. Now of course with my raised suspension and everything like that, it definitely is more nimble than it used to be, but I mean, the fact that I can do this on a bike this heavy is impressive. So moving on from the weight, I'm going to go ahead and focus on the gas tank. Now the gas tank, I believe, is a 4 and some change, exact amount here. But with that amount of fuel, you can get a very decent range. Which, speaking of, I'm almost out of gas. Oops. But yeah, the range on this bike is great. That's one big gripe I had about my Sportster, is you were looking at a 120 mile range. With this bike, you can easily get over 200 miles. Now, of course, if you do any changes to the tune or anything like that, that's going to have an effect on it. But stock right out of the box, you can definitely do some medium to long distance rides with no problem. Next up on my list is going to be the power. So this bike does come with the 103 motor. I believe that equates to over 1600 cc's. And I believe that is just the perfect amount for this bike from stock. Now, of course, like I mentioned, I like to do the faster, aggressive riding, but right off the showroom floor, this bike has the perfect amount of power. The torque band, the throttle response, everything on this bike is extremely good. Definitely has enough power to hold its own on the highway, but it's not overly powered to where it's uncomfortable and uncontrollable in the city. It's just that perfect blend of power and able to be controlled. Next up on my list is going to be the price. The Street Bob, I believe, is the cheapest of the Dyna models. I believe the MSRP is $13,500, and honestly, that is what this bike is worth. Hell, even $14,000 for this bike, I feel would be justified. Now, you might be looking at other comparable models and say, well, it's probably the most expensive, but this brings me to my next point, which is going to be the level of customization. With paying that extra little bit and getting that Harley-Davidson name tag, your customization options probably double, if not triple. And that's one thing that really brought me to the Street Bob models. Between the Street Bob and the Lowrider, they're pretty similar, but the Street Bob was a little bit cheaper and pretty much was the same thing once you stripped away a lot of the excess crap. So for example, I mean, obviously, as you can tell, this bike is nowhere near stock. So wherever you take your bike is, I mean, literally the sky's the limit. You can go for the slammed low look, you can go for the raised up club style look, you name it, you can do it with this bike. But I do want to bring this in, because I did bring this in a little bit with my Sportster review video, and I feel like it's definitely worse with the Dynas. And that is going to be the, I'm going to call it the Intra-Dyna feud. So there's two main styles of Dynas. You've got your club style, which is what you see here, the race suspension, the fairing T-bars, and then I don't even know what you would call the other style. It's pretty much the opposite. Big ape hangers slammed in the rear. There is a lot of intra-Dyna conflict. So if you're the type of person that's, you know, can't just do you and not care what other people think, you might run into a little bit of, like I said, intra-Dyna conflict from other Dyna riders, and that's completely separate from the inter-Harley conflict that is the baggers versus the Sportsters versus the Dynas, which I think is completely fucking retarded, but that doesn't make it exist any less. So when I do these reviews, a lot of the question I get asked the most is this a good beginner's bike? Now, everyone's going to tackle this question differently, and this is how I attack it. I feel like no matter what bike you go with as a starter, the law of natural selection is going to take play. What I mean by that is, it doesn't matter if you start off with a 1600cc Dyna or a 1000cc Hayabusa sport bike. It's how you respect the power that that machine has, and basically just how disciplined you are in your riding. If you're the type that likes to go balls to the wall, but you're maybe not skilled enough to go balls to the wall just yet, there's a chance that you're going to hurt yourself on this bike. But if you're, you know, an adult with logic and self-restraint, I don't see any reason why this bike would be a bad starter bike. Now, I'll throw in the same caveat I always do with every other beginner bike question. I wouldn't recommend starting on a brand new bike, just because chances are you're going to drop your bike. It's really not an if, it's a when. And it's a much easier pill to swallow if you drop a bike that you bought for $3,000 off of Craigslist, as opposed to a bike you just took off the dealership showroom for 14, 13 grand. But that's your decision to make. That's just my little input on it. And if you have any questions, please go ahead and leave them down in the comment section below, and I'll answer as many of them as I possibly can in the most timely manner as I can. Well guys, that's going to do it for today's episode. If you found this video helpful in any way, please go ahead and hit that like button. If you're new to the channel, I highly suggest you hit that subscribe button. I do put out 3 videos a week, mostly Dyna featured, all pretty much Harley featured every single week. And as always, thank you for watching. I'll see you guys next time.